Welcome back. You are watching Showdown. I've been speaking to Stuart Robert out of Brisbane. He's staying with us. I'll be coming back to him in a moment, but I want to bring Michael Danby in on the discussion. Welcome here. What are you doing in Sydney, by the way?
I was here doing an arts ministry thing with Tony Burke.
That's where you're supposed to say, I've come here for your show. But we'll move on. It's all right. I'll get past the snub. It's a hell of a snub, though, isn't it, last Friday, for Kevin Rudd to be standing up next to the Papua New Guinean Prime Minister and basically announcing, we think your country is such an awful place to live. Thanks very much for doing a deal with us because it should deter the boats. The mere thought that somebody might end up living where you live.
Well, look, we have to work as a country where you can't say that people coming under the current system by boat, where 1,100 people have drowned, is humanitarian. There's nothing left-wing about that.
Yeah, you're not answering my question. That was the message, though, wasn't it? The message was, Prime Minister O'Neill, it's great to have you on board. God, your country's horrible. Thank God for that, because we're going to be able to threaten people with the mere prospect that they have to live amongst you. I mean, that was the message.
You're giving a sort of an amusing bottom line to the whole thing, but seriously, if you're an Afghan, a Hazara living in parts of Afghanistan or Pakistan, you may still want to risk it. I understand those people, but
then it's not going to stop the boats.
But Peter, the problem is we can't let people outside the country, particularly commercial rings, determine who comes to this country. You can't have people saying that the people in refugee camps who should be under our humanitarian program coming here, they're excluded, but some people in Iran, who are probably a third of the immigration we're getting now by boat, they're okay. You just can't operate like that. Otherwise, you're going to have this thing go from, as it is last year, 5,000 to 20,000. What are we going to have, 50,000 next year, and you're going to say it's okay then?
But is the deal good enough? I mean, Stuart Robert and I have been talking about this, and he's been making the pretty fair point that it's about the length of an op-ed. I mean, it's 2 pages. It doesn't really go into the kind of nuts and bolts that give Australia the protection that it probably wants on this arrangement going forward, in light of the fact that we are handing over a lot of control of a hell of a lot of money to get this deal in place.
Well, there'll be a lot of Australian government supervision of AusAid money, as there usually is in Papua New Guinea. I don't see why working with the Papua New Guineans on expanding some of the detention centres isn't an idea that won't work. I think people should be treated with dignity,
but can I ask
and that they're going to be done in a proper way between Australia and PNG.
There seems to be a disagreement of opinion here between Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and Prime Minister O'Neill from PNG, because he's all but declared that the money's going to go into his own private bank account and he'll be determining how it gets done, whereas Prime Minister Rudd says there'll be all these checks in place. Which one is it? I mean, who's right on this? Because they are at odds.
I think that's, I know you're amusing, but that's to the point of being trite to say it's going to his private bank account.
I'm not suggesting untoward by him, but government control, him as the leader,
the Papua New Guineans will probably set these priorities in terms of where these detention centres are going to be, the welfare conditions, the working conditions of these people, particularly if some of them get processed as refugees into Papua New Guinea. But of course, Australia supervises each project that is built over there with our taxpayers' money. And by the way, I think it's a bit cheeky of Stuart to say that the bar is that people are not deported within 24 hours or 48 hours. I mean, Tony Abbott was a former health minister. He knows that to be serious about all of these people, you have to have their health checks done. These things have to be done responsibly in an ordered way. I mean, it's just sort of setting a Daily Telegraph high bar, which is designed to sort of make the Labor Party or the Labor government look bad. Silly.
Right of reply on that, Stuart Robert. I mean, how do you respond to that idea that you shouldn't be setting that kind of 24-hour, 48-hour time limit on it, given health checks?
Peter, I went to Bougainville as part of the response in the Civil War in '98, and I had 4 days' notice to go for 5 months. So the idea that you can't do things quickly, A, is nonsense, and B, the government's own plan for the Malaysian swap deal said 72 hours. That was the government's own plan. So why is it they can operate 72 hours with one of their failed plans, and this failed plan they can't do it at all? They can either do it or they can't do it. Were they lying then or are they lying now?
Well, Michael Danby, that's not an unfair point by Stuart Robert when he went to Bougainville 4 days. And wouldn't it be in your interest to get them there as quickly as possible?
No one's doubting his patriotism. Of course we'll get them there as quickly as possible. We're going to treat these people in a dignified way. Their health checks are going to be done. People are not going to be abused. And of course the difference that when the Greens and the Liberals worked together on Malaysia to sink the government's plan, of course people could have been sent to Malaysia and immediately fitted into accommodation, given work, etc. The Liberals and the Greens work very effectively together to torpedo that.
Stuart, Robert, can I ask you this one? This is a criticism that I've seen levelled at Tony Abbott for a lot of his raising of concerns about the deal is that doing so is an attempt to kill it for political reasons, every bit as much as Kevin Rudd's attempt to get the deal in place is probably overtly political as well. How do you respond to that?
Well, Prime Minister O'Neill yesterday said the capacity of number of people will determine how many people will go. So 600 is the capacity of Manus in January. That's in January. We're now in July. 200 people have arrived in the last 3 days. I think the average Australian can work out that it is just a con. There is no obligation. There is no mandatory taking of all people. PNG will only take those who are security and health vetted. Anyone who fails, that will stay here. Children under the age of 7 will stay here with their parents. Seriously, it's a con. The number of exemptions now is becoming huge.
Stuart obviously doesn't want this to succeed. I mean, it's a con. There are people already in the pipeline coming here. You have to give it at least a week or 2 weeks or a little while to work to stop the flow of people coming. For instance, the ads in the newspapers. I know people are cynical about them, but with people who are relatives of all of these people who've come already to Australia, who are expecting family reunion, who are trying to get them on these boats, this is the primary way.
So you can put your hand on your heart, can you, Michael Danby, and say those ads are not about voters; they're about talking to the relatives of potential asylum seekers.
Well, you can be as cynical as you like about people's motives, but the point is that there is an element of communicating directly with people.
I'm sure there's a small element, but the primary element is, hey, here's a few million taxpayers' dollars to get the message across for
the
votes.
Primary idea is to communicate with the people who are communicating with them by SMS, by information in the country that they want to come to, and this is the way to make sure that they know about it.
It's a perverse use of taxpayers' money for advertisements, Michael. You know it. The Australian people know it. If you were serious about sending a message, you'd be taking out full-page advertisements in the Jakarta Times or whatever the local daily is over there.
Don't sell them short, Stuart, Robert. I'm sure they're happy to spend the money there as well. But let me ask you about taxpayers' dollars. I'm getting sick of both sides on this sort of stuff, frankly, because we had John Howard in 1995 railing against the money being spent on the One Nation message, not the One Nation Party, the One Nation message of Paul Keating. We then had John Howard in government spending copious amounts of dollars on taxpayers' advertising, including towards the end with work choices. We then had Kevin Rudd railing against the spend on work choices, saying this has got to stop, it's a disgrace. We've now got the coalition railing against Kevin Rudd's spend in terms of government taxpayer advertising on this score. When is someone going to stand up and actually truly put this to an end? Do you think there's any chance of you guys doing it in government?
Well, let's hold Kevin Rudd to account for what he said in 2007. He said any expenditure 3 months out from an election must be agreed with the opposition leader. I don't see him calling Tony Abbott. He said that this sort of advertising or advertising must stop, that there'll be a special body that it'll go through. And, of course, the Auditor-General has shown that he's completely thrown those policies out the window.
And I agree with you on that. I agree he has, but I guess what I'm asking is there any chance of him not just being yet another PM who throws that stuff out the window? Is there a chance that Tony Abbott, when he comes in, will actually stick to the line that so many opposition leaders claim they will do as Prime Minister and change the rules?
Let's hold people to their word, because we shouldn't be liberal and light with the truth. And right now we have a Prime Minister who is shown not to be truthful. A Prime Minister who said 3 months out from an election he would include the opposition leader on all government advertisements. This is a Prime Minister that says one thing and does another thing when everyone else is not watching.
Michael Danby, it's a fair point.
Tony Abbott is the man who said initially that he supported this proposal to have people sent to Papua New Guinea as a way of deterring this increasing number of people arriving by boat. Now, I actually think the policy issue is actually more important than negativity about this side of politics or that side of politics. Come on, Stuart, if we're in the Australian national interest, if we want to stop these people, will you support this being, if it's successful, if people start drying up, will you continue to support the government on it, or will you continue to play politics and say, no, because Labor's doing it, can't possibly be successful, or us support it?
Michael, after 6 years, you talk of national interest, 10 billion in coin, 1,000 people dead and 47,000 people.
So if people want to stop it, you're against it.
Your eighth attempt to try and get something right at the last minute, and you speak of the national interest. Well, let me tell you about the national interest. The coalition will stop the boats. We'll turn them around where it's safe to do so. You will not get a permanent protection visa when you come to Australia. You'll get a temporary protection visa. We'll process you offshore and we will stop it.
Stuart, Robert, can I ask you a question about TPVs just quickly? There has to be an end point, doesn't there? I wonder how long can someone stay on a TPV under coalition policy? Is it 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Presumably there has to be a point at which they are provided with permanent residency.
No, there comes a point where their country is safe for them to return. Remember, the Refugee Convention never envisaged permanent settlement.
But sorry to interrupt, but I need to ask about that because some wars are ongoing for more than 10 years. So does that mean that you could arrive in Australia, have 3 kids while you're here, get married and end up in a situation where you're on a permanent TPV?
The intent of the convention was that there would be temporary protection until such time as it's safe to go home. Now, you're seeing that in Israel right now. You're seeing South Sudanese being repatriated back to South Sudan as a new nation. And that's where the convention is being shown to work.
All right, we're going to move on to other issues after the break, but just before we get to the break, Michael Danby, one more question on this.
Yep.
Why didn't Kevin Rudd, if this is truly in the national interest, when he announced it on Friday, why didn't he, as part of his rhetoric, look to bring Tony Abbott into the tent? And I think that has a strategic value to go with it as well. Had he approached this as a bipartisan issue and offered the opportunity for Abbott to come on board, I actually think it would have played a political message because it would have nullified Tony Abbott's attacks, but it also would have sent a genuine message that he was not approaching this as a partisan issue. It strikes me that he was gleeful that he had this deal as a wedge against Abbott, not just as a good policy idea.
Peter, surely the idea of getting Papua New Guinea on board and negotiating this with the Papua New Guinea Prime Minister, this rather comprehensive arrangement, I mean, isn't that the main game? And after all, Stuart and Tony Abbott were supporting it until a couple of days ago. Now they're trying to sort of pick holes in it and undermine the whole scheme because they don't want the government to be successful in deterring this increasing number of people coming by boat.
I'm sure that they don't, frankly, at a political level. However, it's also fair to say that they have legitimate concerns, don't they, about Labor's ability to implement this, given past mispractices in a range of areas.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that when you have the current circumstances, you don't try your level best to make sure that this works because it's in the national interests of Australia. If, does Tony Abbott and Stuart want to be responsible for more people drowning at sea? I want this thing dealt with in a way that these people are not facing those kind of circumstances. That
they're facing something marginally better, which is a lifetime of living in Papua New Guinea if they're a genuine refugee.
Well, I think that's denigrating Papua New Guinea to an extent that's completely unfair.
Really? Its crime level is through the roof. Port Moresby, members of the military who I know who have been to Port Moresby say they feel safer in downtown Kabul than they do walking through Port Moresby. It's a pretty rough place.
Well, that may be the truth about crime in Port Moresby, but the circumstances under which these people are going to be moved to are to camps supervised by Australia and Papua New Guinea, with Australian police going over there. There's an extra 50 Australian federal police. I don't think that's the basis on which Stuart is opposed to these people being sent over to Papua New Guinea. Just like previously when they were going to be sent to Malaysia, suddenly all of the Liberals started complaining that they're all going to get the cane. I never heard the coalition complaining about human rights situation in Malaysia before.
Mate, Malaysia
they were going to be sent to Malaysia. We could have sent them easily there and they would have had work and accommodation.
Unaccompanied minors over there. It was outrageous, and you should have been outraged at the Malaysian proposal.
All right, hold that thought, gentlemen. The best part about this segment has not been the debate. It's been me getting to watch Peter Bentley and Hugh McDermott sit there frustrated beyond belief that they're not in the conversation. Sorry, gentlemen. I'll bring you in after the commercial break. Bring you in after the commercial break. We're going to move on to other issues. You're watching Showdown. Back in a moment.